Hi, my name is Michael Gilmore, and I'm one of the founders of ParkLogic.com and also the writer of Whizbang's blog. And it gives me absolutely wonderful pleasure to welcome Joe Politzer, who's now come and joined the ParkLogic team. And I thought it'd be good to do an interview with Joe, as he's going to tell us a few things about himself. And I think we're going to have a bit of fun here, Joe, aren't we?
Of course, don't we always?
Oh, always. Yeah. I think we talk for about an hour at least every single day. Joe, whereabouts are you based there, Joe?
Right now, I'm in San Diego.
In San Diego, for a while there, you were in Bali or something, weren't you?
Yeah, for a while I was in Bali, which is great, but I got a 3-year-old, and we all decided.
But you got to put up with that surf every day, don't you?
Yeah, actually, I surfed this morning and had a good time.
Yeah, that sounds great. So, Joe, like I said in the introduction, the brief introduction there, I thought it'd be good for the ParkLogic customers and also people who are interested in coming on board the ParkLogic platform to meet you and to get a few things about you and it's one of the faces behind ParkLogic. And anyway, so Joe, just can you tell us a few things about yourself? Did you grow up in San Diego or Bali? Like, where did you grow up there?
I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, which
Oh, that's a long way from the surf, isn't it? And that'd be a bit cold up there.
yeah, it's kind of. I don't want to talk bad about it, but I'll say Baltimore is a great place to grow up, but for me, not a great place to be a grown-up. So, when I was a kid, we used to come to San Diego all the time.
Yeah, so you
And
migrated across.
yeah, I was kind of like, this is better for me. So I went to college at UCSD. Strictly, I mean, it's a great school, but really I could have cared less. Strictly went to UCSD because it was in the area I wanted to live.
Fair enough. So what did you study there?
Computer science and engineering, and I have a minor in management science, which is their version of a minor in business. They just
Wow.
have one with that.
So you're a geek then, a geek with some money on the side.
Kinda, yeah. I'm a little proud of it.
Yeah, let me tell you, I'm the same. I got a Bachelor of Science with Electronics, Computer Science, and I must admit it's an absolute pleasure to talk with someone who not only is in the business development area, and we'll come to that shortly, but also understands the technology. And I think that's why we hit it off. So, what do you love about technology? What in particular that really caused you to gravitate to the internet so well?
I'm a guy that likes to create things with my hands. And, it could be working on a car or building something with a hammer, but I like that I can sit with a laptop and create something from nothing. I'm a big fan of making something from nothing. And it's amazing, the scale of, if you want to use a hammer, it's really hard to make a giant building. But if you're going to use your computer, you can make something massive from your bed or anywhere, as long as you know how to do it. And I think that's a really great thing, and it's kind of like, creating your own destiny, it's like, creating the world around you almost in a weird way, but, there still is the real world when we turn around and, we still have to go to the grocery store for eggs and milk. And,
How true. I remember my very first internet company was back in about 94, 95 or something like that. So right at the birth of the net in Australia, the commercial internet. I had the motto for the company was "We change the world," and the concept was you could build a site, and someone in Mexico could look at it, and you just impacted Mexico that little bit.
yeah,
And it
people don't
blew
realize.
my mind away that I could do that.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool thing, and people will quickly write this stuff off. But yeah, it's all these little things. The fact that so many people can do that too, it just adds up.
Yeah, it just amazed me when I look at ParkLogic, and I was comparing it to, say, a TV network, say, once again in Australia, and we have literally millions and millions of people coming to the sites we have under management every single day. And yet the TV stations here in Australia, they're happy if they get like 100,000 people watching a show. It's just like I'm thinking, hang on a second here. Yeah, we're really impacting the world. And which brings me to the next question. Like, so how did you get into domaining that?
Oh, no, I'll try and not make this too long a story.
Yeah.
So I
We've all
started
got
out,
one of those long stories, don't we?
I'm really bad. I love to tell a long story. But I started out when I was in college. I created a small IT business for my dorm room, kind of from nothing, part of the whole making something from nothing thing. And I grew that over the years to, at one point I had 4 employees and an office and all that great stuff. And I forget, I think it was like around 900 clients. It was pretty serious. And it was hard work.
So you worked really hard to keep everyone employed?
Yeah, I had to be a boss of all these people that, always had reasons why they couldn't come to work. And, just like the normal stuff. And then there were all these customers, and being an IT shop is not, I kind of compare it with being a plumber. When your toilet's overflowing, it's like an emergency. When you can't send email, it's like just as serious an emergency.
Yeah.
Nobody's like in a good mood when they call you, and it's like panic and chaos. They don't really care that it's 4 a.m. and that you're sleeping and, your kids are asleep or whatever, It's like
Yeah.
the nicest civilized people, like it all goes out the window when they can't send email. But it was a lot of work. And then I had a buddy that, a guy I knew who essentially ended up with a domain name. And this domain name, he ended up parking it at one point, sort of long story short. And suddenly it was making loads of money parked. And it was kind of an eye-opener. And I was kind of like, wow, I am at the office until 9 p.m. every night, and then I'm still working on my couch. Even though I'm pretending I'm not working, I'm still working.
Yeah.
2 in the morning, and then I'm going to wake up early and to a list of angry customers because they still can't send email. You can only help so many of them at one time, and and it was a hard business. There were scaling problems, but and then my buddy's just sitting at the beach with this domain name making all this money. It wasn't just like a light bulb went on. It was like a spotlight went on. Like you were doing the wrong thing, And
I think we all had that experience. Let me tell you, I know I did.
Yeah, it was like what I am doing is just not. It is not what I want to be doing anymore. So from that moment forward, it was just trying to figure out how can I do something. Everyone has their own circumstances, and there were circumstances that led up to, this person, being at that moment in their life. Well, I had to find the circumstances that were going to lead me to, being in a similar situation, right? So, I'm a giant nerdy programmer at heart. I like to make things, so I started figuring out how am I going to do this, So, I started registering domain names, there's just like endless opportunities in the domain space. As soon as one opportunity goes away, another one starts. So,
Yeah, that's what I love about this space, I must admit.
yeah, it's, and if you have the ability to capitalize on the opportunities, I'm fortunate that I can, like whatever it is needs to be made. I don't have to like find some freelancer to make it. I don't have to, I can just, it's just going to be like a long weekend or something,
Yes.
It's done, and I see if it works. If it works, great. I scale it, do it some more. If it doesn't work, well, I'll just try something else, and it'll be another long weekend. And, you figure you get, plenty of weekends.
Yeah, absolutely. So there you are. You obviously built up your own portfolio and all that sort of thing. And to cut a long story short, so they're traveling down the road, and you're sort of thinking, how can you monetize a portfolio better? And you began to really think about that, I believe. Is that right?
I did, yeah. I'll give you, me and my long story. So it was like 2006. I registered my first domain name, for the purpose of being a domainer, not like for the brilliant idea I had that, will never take off. And then in 2009, I sold my IT business and became a full-time domain person.
That must have been a relief.
Yeah, that was great. Sold that, never looked back. Kind of grabbed my surfboard and just went surfing all around the world with the computer, registering domains every time I landed somewhere. I had a system that would figure out what domains to register. I just had to go and review it and register them. So, one of many systems. Everyone's got their own thing, portfolio building. But yeah, fast forward to the future, I started building another system. You know, I started envisioning a better way to monetize my names. In fact, I got into a critical mass where I had so many domain names. I took a moment and I said, this is getting out of hand. I need something to manage this better because it's only getting worse. Like the more domain names I have, the greater this problem is going to be to overcome in the future.
As I always say to
So
people, it's sort of like you can only do so many VLOOKUPs in your spreadsheet, right?
yeah, and it's kind of a dirty little secret. I don't even know how to do VLOOKUP. I use something called index match. It's like an index formula with a nested match. It has the same exact end result. It's a timey thing before VLOOKUP was available. That's like a newer Excel feature. But yeah, even just the other day I was trying to figure out VLOOKUP. I'm like, this is madness.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I must admit, I remember with my own portfolio, I was doing so many VLOOKUPs and trying to analyze the data and all that sort of stuff, and I went crazy. And I came to the same conclusion as you. So like, there's got to be a better way. And
Yeah.
it was uh, that led on to obviously building ParkLogic and all that sort of stuff. But I believe that just before we move on to that section about how we got together, people knew you also as a major domain broker. Is that right?
Oh yeah. Well, I sold the business in 2009, and or the IT business. I just kind of went surfing for a while, and I didn't really focus on work for a while. I just kind of hung out and surfed all around the world, and just did, little bits here and there. And eventually, I was actually doing less and less work.
I've got to ask a
Eventually,
question though. Did you take your laptop down the beach at any time?
never.
Never.
It's one of those things. When you actually do it, it's not cool.
Yeah, it's not cool. No.
But, yeah. So at one point, I like sold my portfolios, and there's like more story to it. And then I just sort of decided I had to do work again, and I had built my first portfolios like around a lot of concepts that weren't really relevant anymore. And everyone said parking was dead, so I kind of wasn't focused on parking so much. And I've always me and Eric Rice have like a great thing.
Isn't he a
We've
great guy?
always
Eric's a
yeah,
really, really good guy. For those of you
it's kind
watching
of
this
like
video and don't know Eric, turn up to any domain conference and he'll be there. He's always there, and
yeah,
he's one of the stalwarts of the industry. I got a lot of time for Eric.
yeah, he's like kind of my brother from another mother kind of thing. But so we sort of teamed up and started doing this brokering thing more publicly because I had been broke. I had a bunch of premium names of my own I'd been selling, and we brokered like behind, not publicly, some names for people. So we decided, like, I owned DN.biz because I had bought it in my journeys because I saw it was like up for auction. I was like, oh, well, this is great. I must have DN.biz. So I bought DN.biz, and that was the day I figured out what to do with it. So I started brokering, and brokering is really cool, but it just doesn't touch on my tech nerdy side enough. It doesn't really give me my fix. So, and then I started noticing that parking wasn't dead, and that's just noise. Unfortunately, there's this whole thing out there where everybody thinks parking is dead. The thing is, parking's just not free anymore. It used to be like, you know, you could almost register any domains and make money, like as long as it was semi-extensible. You know what I mean?
Now,
It's
I
just not
agree
the
with
case.
you on that. Can I interrupt for a second? I agree. Many
Yeah.
people think that parking's dead, but it's not. And I think you put it really well. It's just not free anywhere more. The fact that it takes a bit of effort, doesn't it?
Oh, it's absolutely hard work now.
Yeah.
So I started building up a portfolio again. I don't know, like April of 2000. Was that 13? Yeah, maybe last year, 2013. And I was really excited about it because I got to do my nerdy thing again and make code, and just the old model didn't work. So there's a new model, and I slowly had to figure out and put together what the new model was and how I was going to conquer it. So, we got that all sorted, and I started building names, and like I said, like, got to a critical mass point where I started having a lot of domain names, and I was just like, I was parking them at, a bunch of different places and using systems that would split the traffic. Like I knew there was a notion, just from being around, like I knew, and just plain common sense from being a guy that knows about things, that not every parking company is created equal, not every domain is created equal, not every visitor is created equal. So, you know, there was the obvious concept that the traffic, it would make more money if every visitor went to the right solution, you know? So at the time I thought foolishly that I could just split my traffic between all these parking companies. I had some technology in place that would, send 33% of the traffic here, 33% of there. And then I was just going to write it all down on a piece of paper, like a scoreboard, and then figure out, oh, who's the best parking company for each of my domain names, Yeah, that's all well and good, but in practicality, it doesn't actually make any sense at all. Because you find it's a dynamic industry, so many things happen, like a parking company loses, like, the rev share with Google, or another parking company, will just delete a bunch of landers that you'd already spent like all month long, like figuring out what's the best lander for your names, or like an endless mountain of minutia of things that change, and it's a game of minutia.
Yeah, I think the thing that we find difficult or challenging is just the management of the domains at each of the parking companies. And it just scales the magnitude of problems, the scale. And I think it's one of the things that if we cut through to how we sort of got together, it's one of the things that surprised you was how much detail you have to go into.
Oh, it's ridiculous, You add names, there's conflicts, it's easy enough for you to forget you got a conflict and your name never got added. Then your names are getting pulled out of your account because someone else added them to their account. It's just like not a perfect world, so things like that happen, and it is not. I decided it was. So my idea was to write it all down on paper and figure out on paper how I could write some code that would do what I've been doing on paper. But it just, it got to be kind of a crazy thing, and it was very complex. But nonetheless, it had to be done. I started writing the code. I started making something, And then right around then is when I met you, and I said, well, I heard, ParkLogic rotates names. I'd like a better solution than what I'm doing to rotate names in the meantime while I make my own thing. I said, let's just do this. So I'd like to, so it's better managed. I'll make more money. Everything will be great because the way I've been doing it is just not acceptable. And then I'll make my own thing, and when it's done, I'll just use my own thing or whatever.
Yeah.
But we just kept talking. And I kept kind of finding out that you already made what I was making.
Yeah.
So I've kind of been, when it comes to, this sort of work, when it comes to the coding and the creating, I've kind of been a one-man army since the beginning of time, really. And for the first time ever, I really found someone that kind of already did a lot of what I was doing. And, I even had suggestions for you, and you actually implemented them quickly, which is one of those things that never really happens in the real world.
Let me tell you, not nearly as quick as I'd like. It's always the way, isn't it?
Yeah, just the fact that it actually happened, was nothing short of miraculous, really, like in the real world. Like, when do you call a parking company and be like, I wish that it did this, and then like a week or two later, it did that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we do our best. Like we honestly, like we do our best, but it's. I just remember that time when we got together and we just began talking more and more about the portfolio. And to be quite blunt with you, you were a complete mongrel in those beginning times because you were just so. This is the way it's got to be done. This is what I'd say. Don't fight the algorithms. They've been developed over 8 years. And it was really good.
I have to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, I like to know how things work.
Yeah.
I'm a guy that's always taken apart. When something breaks, I don't just throw it away. I dismantle it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So it was really good actually during those times, and I think one thing led to another, and in the end, back in it was at the beginning of June, you came on board the ParkLogic team, and it was an absolute pleasure to having you on board with us. And it's been great. Yeah. Particularly now that you're in the US time zone, you've moved from Bali to San Diego.
Yeah, I like to think you get a few more hours sleep a day.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Bali, it's like you kind of get used to the schedule of, you know, you're free all day. There's no, once it gets to be about 11 a.m., like the majority of the world is asleep or doesn't care anymore. So you can just surf all day. You're not even going to have any emails when you get back from the beach, just spam. And then, start around 9 p.m., the East Coast of the United States wakes up.
Yeah. Know the
And then,
feeling.
well, I hate to leave out Europe because Europe is like super important. Um, I'm just an American, so I just always have this problem. I'm trying to work on it. But so yeah, Europe starts around 3 p.m. there, which is perfectly reasonable. Europe is actually quite difficult from San Diego, unfortunately. It's like 9 a.m. they're off work, and then 5 p.m. or late at night they're starting again, kind of thing here.
Yeah. So you've been working with ParkLogic, and what sort of role you've been facilitating? Like I can tell people about it, but I'd love to hear it. I'm sure they'd love to hear it from you. The sort of things you're dealing with.
Sure. Well, the thing that really excited me about it, I wanted to be part of the product. I wanted, because we had already essentially, I had ideas and they happened, and there's still ideas and they're still happening, and there's so much cool stuff that nobody sees yet that's happening,
Yeah.
And then, I also have all these great relationships with people. I've worked with the whole domain space since the day I started. I just, I don't do anything halfway. I just dove right in and started meeting people and everything I could. So I know all them, and I find myself in situations where I find people that have great ideas or great domains or whatever, but there's like a little thing that needs to happen for them first. So what I like to think of is I like to solve people's problems and solve it with ParkLogic.
Yeah.
It's, not only does it solve their problem, but it does it better than anywhere else, in my opinion. So, I've created programs for specific clients that have had specific needs for their domains. You and me have hacked out lots of weird little special needs projects.
And to be quite blunt with you, some of those programs are pretty complex.
Oh,
Yeah, like
absolutely.
unbelievably complex. Yeah. And I know the rest of the ParkLogic team has really sort of been backing you up in the work you've been doing and that sort of thing around some of these clients and everything, whether they be large domainers, whether they be registrars or anything like that. You've been really working with quite a number of good players.
Yeah, I've always hated, so every time in my past, I would hit, we all hit things where we wish the product did something that it doesn't do, and we've all been trained to just accept that. That's just the way it is. So I've never, ever accepted that, ever. Whenever I hit something that doesn't work the way I want it to, that just means it's going to be a long weekend. So
Yeah, I think that one of the things we're really excited about is just some of the development happening behind the scenes, and love to be able to share that another time. Maybe we can do a joint video or something like that together when it finally comes out. But there's a lot of really interesting thinking. I think that at ParkLogic, the thing that keeps us awake every single night is how do we extract more from the traffic, and how do we really monetize that better for customers. And we literally, we worry about every penny. I remember we took you through a client review meeting, like an optimization meeting, and you were really blown away by that.
yeah, I was most surprised that I felt like, yeah, you've been doing that, but it's not really out there. Like, that was one of the first things I started telling everybody was like, do you know this, like, we review your names every week.
Yeah.
I was like, do you want to, and I can, I started telling them I'll show you a copy of the review. And, we rank every single one of your domains. If you have 1,000 domains, there's one in first place and there's one in 1,000th place.
Yeah.
And then the job is to try and get the one in 1,000th place up to first place. And it's a never-ending job because then the one in first place is no longer in first place.
Correct. Yeah.
So,
it's funny. People come to us quite often and they say, well, what do you do when you stopped optimizing my domain names? I said, well, what do you mean? Well, once you found the place for them, they said, you need to understand this. We never stop.
Yeah.
It's just an ongoing process. Every single day, we're constantly working away, and our systems are constantly working away at improving domains. We just don't stop.
Yeah, I mean, you can't stop. I mean, certainly there are levels of, in the beginning, we have to review it like almost every day,
Yeah.
but after a year, like a weekly interval, or, it becomes more practical because there's nobody's getting a gain out of every day at one point. But
It's interesting.
the algorithm's always going, and that's like super important.
Oh yeah.
So every day something changes somewhere.
It's interesting. Uh, I was looking at a what we call a forensic report just recently for a client, and this particular client, they have about 5,000 domains with us, and but the actual report in Excel was something like 150,000 rows just for one of the tabs, and there was like 20 tabs, and it all gets populated, it all gets worked out and synthesized down to um, exactly where the traffic's going, what's happening with the traffic. All that information is there, and you have to get your hands dirty in each domain. Um, and I remember sitting down with the CEO of one of the major companies in the industry, and they were surprised. They said, "Can't you just manage things at a portfolio level?" I said, "Yeah, you can, but you're not going to extract the value, and that's why you
Yeah, I
got to
mean
get
that's what
dirty."
everybody else does.
Sorry?
That's what Don Q Domainer does. You do the if you're just a domainer, you do the best you can, and that's the thing. Domainers, everybody realizes there's just all this more work you can do and squeeze more money out of your domains, but there's kind of a brick wall to it because a normal, it's not practical for just a standard person to do all that stuff. So instead, they just can't, and that's where we come in. You know, we we have a system. We have created something that does all that work. That's reasonably impossible for a standard human being to do
Oh, I
because
wouldn't
we
want to
have
have to do it.
machines and processes and all of this stuff that has to happen. And it's just not practical for a person to do that with their domain name. So instead, they just leave a huge chunk of upside on the table every single day if they're not doing all this stuff.
So here's a question, Joe. So who is it that you would like to be able to speak with that say currently not a ParkLogic customer? Who would be the sweet spot that you'd like to have a chat with?
I mean, it seems like a weird question to be honest with you, because I feel like anybody who has who has any kind of a portfolio with parking revenue could be doing it better, So
And
I mean,
I think one of the things that we try to do as much as possible is not just provide better revenue and everything, but also manage risk. Like we spend a lot of the time managing risk on some portfolios and trying to work through that.
oh, I mean, it's a cash flow thing, So your portfolio, when you end up being the person with a portfolio, becomes, it's supposed to be a stable monthly cash flow, right? That's the buzzword. So, but if your stable monthly cash flow fluctuates every month, well, then it's actually not a stable monthly cash flow. So, you really want, that's like rotating the names right there and doing it right. I mean, you can't self-rotate your names and write down the winners. Just, because that's not a stable monthly cash flow. Because then, oh, you have a bad month. Well, now you just found out you need to start over again. But if this is real time, actively all the time, it smooths out those bumps. So, and that covers the risks.
Yeah, we're
You know,
doing that constantly. But can I just say, Joe, we're just going to wrap things up at the moment. It's absolute pleasure to work with you. And it really shows, I think, the power of this industry. There's people like yourself who are, say, have a technical background, or and then combined with biz dev, and you migrate through, have your own portfolio, get a lot of experience. Now, in the end, we're working together, and I think
yeah,
it's great.
yeah, this is fantastic. I'm just happy that I feel like I instead of being a one-man army, it's all of us against the world. It made better. I feel like I got half my weekend back.
Only half though. Only half.
Yeah, well, you wake up and you're a day ahead, so I lose part of Sunday.
Yeah, that's true. But anyway, so there you have it. It's been great meeting you, Joe, once again, for all that, introducing you anyway to everyone out here. And I'm sure that if you have any questions for Joe, he'd like to have a chat with you. Or if you have questions for me, I'd love to talk with you as well. And either of us about your domains, your domain portfolio, and how you can extract more value from them. Because that's really what we're on about, isn't it, Joe?
I mean, that's the premise.
That's exactly right. So
when you extract more value from their portfolio, they can just keep doing what they're doing.
That's exactly right. Yeah, let me tell you, we've got all the numbers to prove why doing what we do works. But anyway,
it makes me when somebody just wants to park their names at one place. It makes me absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it just drives me nuts too. I was like, oh my gosh, like 75% of their, they're leaving 75% of the money on the table.
Give us your name, and we'll just donate the extra money to charity.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Like, if you don't want it, we'll just give it to somebody else that does, Like, this is crazy.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Anyway, so it's really good. Thank you for your time, Joe. And also, thank you for your time for watching this video. Hope you found it informative, meeting another member of the ParkLogic team. Thanks a lot, everyone, and see you later. Bye.